Look out! The first thing I woke to was the sight of planet Neptune staring me down. What was happening? Focusing my blurred vision through the visor of my helmet, my heart began racing as I realized the entire nose of our vessel had been obliterated. I was the only one fortunate, or unfortunate, enough to be spared. I warned them something like this would happen, taking us in so close to Neptune's rings, but the fool of a pilot had ignored my warning. In the distance, minuscule specks of debris, contrasted by the planet's dull, icy glow, were being pulled into its incredibly dangerous atmosphere. The baleful giant was becoming ever more prominent as it consumed my entire view. This ship was much too close. I looked to the seat beside me and nearly jumped out of my skin. Janet had managed to strap on her safety belt, but failed to secure her helmet in time. Her once lovely face had succumbed to the void of space, swollen to nearly double its size, and her eyes had frozen over from the exposure. There was nothing I could do for her. I sighed in relief. With that bounty hunter out of the picture, I was once again a free man. Keeping myself focused, I knew I'd have to reach the engine room in the center of the ship, and if possible, access the emergency control module to stabilize what was left of this vessel. With no access to the propulsion packs or mag boots kept in the ship's poor excuse for barracks, one slip-up would send me to certain death. Carefully, I unbuckled my safety strap, all the while keeping a very tight grip on the seat. The weightlessness of space would soon give way to Neptune's crushing, inescapable gravity. I used Janet's body to push myself towards a twisted piece of metal that had once been the bottom part of the outer hull. Once I reached it, I carefully propelled myself towards the hatch in the back of the cockpit. Its thickly layered components had endured the damage. Grabbing a hold of the handle, I peered through its small glass screen. The emergency lights were still on, which meant the ship had some power reserve left. I could also see bits of metal on the floor, which meant the artificial gravity was still working inside. But I couldn't enter from this hatch. With the cockpit all but decimated, the ship's dull AI had permanently sealed the hatch. I couldn't pry it open even if I wanted to. My only chance would be the cargo bay door at the stern of the ship. Gathering my courage, I cautiously made my way to the top of the ship. From there, I could see more of the extent of the damage. The satellites they had been hauling were either ripped to shreds or critically damaged, trailing far behind us. The faded yellow hull of the vessel had taken a beating, but luckily seemed intact. One of the side thrusters was sputtering wildly, probably the reason why we hadn't already been pulled in further. This model ship had been designed for deep space salvage and repair, which, much to my advantage, meant it had many handles on its outer hull to grab hold of. But to reach the first one, I would have to somehow propel myself nearly 10 feet down the side. With nothing to aid me, I'd have to jump with extreme precision. Panic ran down my spine. If I overshot the small handle, that would be it. Uttering a prayer, I launched myself slowly towards my goal. For that intense moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own heavy breathing, and my heart pounding to escape my chest. I reached out for the handle. Bam! My gloved hand's grip held firm as the momentum jerked me down towards the side of the hull. My dead man's grip was coming in handy. I'd made it this far. I just had to do it 3 more times before the hatch. For a moment, I thought again of what I'd just left. Those dogs would have hauled me right back to the Union and locked me away forever. Propping my foot against the handle, I launched myself at the next one. Success! I grabbed hold of the handle with ease. Just 2 more times. I positioned myself again, readying myself for the push-off. I just needed to calm myself. Thoughts of grandfather rushed into my mind. Times we had spent together watching the Martian sunset, outside of the habitats in nothing but our suits. That old bastard would have loved to be in this situation. Spinning specks of black came into my vision as I propelled myself towards the third handle, and before I had time to react, a cloud of satellite debris came racing by the ship, hurtling towards Neptune. The smallest specks of metal came flying by, dozens bouncing off of and piercing into the hull. One piece of scrap lodged itself right into my thick visor, cracking it. In a panic, I twisted around, flailing and grasping for the handle, and somehow managed to grab hold. I was now fighting a full-blown panic. The crack was slowly becoming larger, and wouldn't be long before the visor simply broke altogether. An orange-red digital projection filled my visor, flashing, "Warning, warning, integrity failing. I'm dead once it breaks." Desperately looking down the hull, a sinking feeling in my stomach overtook me. The next handle in line had been torn off from the impact of the metal hurtling towards the gas giant. My only chance was to launch myself nearly 8 meters and grab the small beam on the side of the supply entrance, with no way to maneuver and stop myself from bouncing off the hull of the vessel. If I didn't do anything, the exposure will kill me once the helmet breaks, or when Neptune's gravity becomes too powerful for the sinking ship. As my grandfather would have said, I was caught between a small rock and a Martian storm. Damn that old man. Gathering my wits, I decided I might as well attempt it. At least I can die knowing I tried. The crack in my visor had now spread, growing insidious, spidery legs which reached out for the other side of the glass. It was now or never. I launched myself with all the force I could muster, and despite my preparation, I felt my body slowly drifting away from the ship. No, no, no! I desperately outstretched my hand as the back of the ship came zooming by, and, by an act of God, I managed to grab the beam. I was lurched back towards the door as the force of my arm brought me crashing into the small platform in front of the door. I didn't waste any time. The console was intact. Frantically, I mashed in the number code I'd memorized from watching Janet, and with the green light and a confirming beep, the room within depressurized, and the door slowly opened. Quickly, I forced my way inside the still opening depressurization room and slammed my hand down on the button of the console to reseal the door. It shut. With a small green light, Vince began to pump the room full of precious oxygen. When the light in the ceiling turned blue, I ripped off my helmet and nearly forced the door to the interior open. What a blessing gravity was. Even this fake, weaker substitute. First things first, I had to stop the doomed orbit of this ship. I ran to the engine room, which was wide open, but still intact. Pulling up the old-style console with a physical keyboard, I typed in some command prompts to determine the total damage. It wasn't good. There was a fuel leak, and before the ship's AI could reroute away from it, the vessel had lost roughly 73% of its hydrogen reserves. The solar array was at 5% functionality. Only 2 of the 6 hydrogen thrusters were functioning properly, and only 7 of the 24 EM thrusters were operational. On the vessel's current trajectory, there were less than 4 minutes to pull away from Neptune, or it would be stuck in a death spiral towards the planet. I had no intention of dying. Not now. I redistributed any remaining power from non-essential functions to be immediately put into the remaining thrusters, to flip the ship around from its descent, and use the more functioning ones on the back of the vessel to force us away from the blue giant and into a stable orbit. I waited as the prompt simply stated, "Processing," until finally a message appeared saying, "Command entry successful." The lights dimmed, and the ship moaned as it turned itself about and saved me from its nosedive of death. A feeling of relief washed over me. Whew. Next, I checked the computer for any access to communications. The long-range systems were completely destroyed. The only working transmission was the emergency beacon. Once this headless vessel was in a safe orbit, I would turn it on by hand, since the weak AI was already tasked with stabilizing the ship. Seemed I was home free. A figure appeared in the corner of my eye. A bruised and bloody captain stood in the doorway. "You!" He drew his gun and fired at me, barely missing and nearly hitting the console. Seeing my opening, I lunged at him, wrestling the gun out of his hand. Normally, he could overpower me easily, being a very large man. But with my adrenaline pumping and his wounds, he couldn't escape my grip as I choked the life out of him. After the deed, I dragged his body into the airlock, removed his badges, and jettisoned his body into space. There would be no evidence. I pinned his very few commendations onto my suit and settled into my temporary home. Neptune's dim glow now seemed almost peaceful through the window. I only had to sit back, relax, and enjoy my blue vacation until an unsuspecting ship came to my rescue. I hope you guys enjoyed.